get on to the questions. So the first question, well, the second question is, which civil rights icon do you identify with most, and why? All right. So this question is a 2 minute, 30-second question. So please, everybody, try and keep your responses to that. Inky will be cutting back and forth so we can see the timer.
So for me, that's kind of like a challenging question because I definitely appreciate the work that both of those fine men did for our people. But I do find myself leaning more towards the Malcolm X side only because, like in a previous discussion that you and I had before, Marlon, I feel like for Black Americans and even for Africans, at that time, he showed like a different brand, if you want to call it, a different view of a strong Black person, fearless, able to talk freely about, the things he was passionate about. I think for many people, and I don't claim to be a scholar of either, of these men, but just from my general knowledge, I would say for many people view Dr. King as more of, this kind of inclusive, approach that we tend to have as Black people. We want to include everyone in everything that we do, but that's not always the case on, their side, whoever they may be. But I think for Malcolm X, he made it very clear that, we've been this way for so long, and it's now time for us to stand up for stand up for our people, stand up for what we believe, have our own things, support our own people. And in and of itself, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Um, you know, so that's pretty much what I can say at the moment, just to kind of keep it brief.
MLK. Um, One, because I think his strategic, one thing that people don't really understand a lot about MLK was that he was actually looking for trouble. So he would select certain, like, so when they're going to do a protest, they would select, like, they made sure they went to places where the sheriff would be, was extremely racist. So he would get a reaction. He wanted to get the reaction so that they would use the cameras to share the story of exactly what was going on in the South. And so that, I think, is why because, that was back to me, that's a very aggressive strategy. But somehow, I know that he was it was a nonviolent approach, which I really appreciate as well. But I just think that, the tacticalness, the ability to gain a solution, and get the Voting Rights Act. I think that's the main reason why, because he got, deliverables, he got actual stuff, he was able to get stuff done. All right. Next is Tonya.
So it's a very peculiar question for me because if you really study the evolution of both activists, they kind of started out like this, but towards the end of their activism due to assassination, unfortunately, they were like this. So I can't necessarily say I prefer one or the other because in the end, they both had a lot of similarities. Malcolm calmed down on thinking that all white people were evil. Dr. Martin believed that, maybe we didn't necessarily need to be 100% integrated. So I'm going to say that I'm going to eat the meat and spit out the bone, and I'm going to take the best of both of them. I love the strategy and the perseverance of Dr. Martin Luther King, and I love the family and basic structure of what Malcolm X wanted, as far as starting with the family first and the man being the head and the woman supporting the man and the children and stuff like that. Like, I really like that. So I'm not going to say which one because I love both all the same.
Thank you. All right. Next, Gloria.
Well, I won't be long because Toya pretty much said everything I was going to say. I mean, right down to this. Like, Toya, I don't know what sign you are, but you could be my child. Something's going on. Like, I need a daughter. She really said everything. in terms of how I would identify with each of them, it's a little tricky with MLK because I don't know how many times I could turn my cheek. And my children will tell you that I'm not the most patient person. So I feel like I would have been prone to pull a knife on somebody. I don't know if I could sit in that chair as long as those brothers and sisters did.
Please don't do it, sister.
Oh, look, do you see? So, however, Malcolm led a different life. Malcolm was in the streets, and Martin had a more refined upbringing, so to speak. And the differences in that regard, I mean, when you're the pastor's, when you're a pastor's kid, you're almost next to royalty, in the Black community. So the Malcolm, I believe in being armed, and yeah. Thank you, Toya.
No, fine.
You saved me. Look, all I need is a little water now. Thank you, Toya. Next.
All right, Stefan.
So yeah, similarly to Tonia, for me, this has always been a false dichotomy. I don't see a separation between the two, especially as she talked about when you talk about at the end of their respective lives. Of course, Malcolm X was assassinated in February 1965, and Dr. King was assassinated on April 4th, 1968. And so, again, I think it's a false dichotomy. So my answer to that is that I admire them both. I learn from them both. I follow them both. And I think we all should learn and follow from the both of them for what they had to offer us. I would push back a little bit against, not professing to be a scholar, as in Q stated earlier. I'm doing the same, not professing to be a scholar of either of the two, even though, I have done some study of course, what they were about, their philosophies, and in Dr. King's case, theology. But the idea that Malcolm X was somehow violent, nobody has said that, but that is often how we talk about it, or was a proponent of violence, is one that is also misunderstood. I think he's often misunderstood because what Malcolm was a proponent of is similar to what Gloria was saying. She said, she doesn't know how patient she would be. She'd be ready to pull out a knife. Malcolm was for self-defense. So in a sense, both of them were nonviolent. But Malcolm's, of course, departure from Dr. King was, I'm not going to let somebody slap me in the face and that's just going to be what it's going to be. Malcolm was for the defense of yourself and of your family and thus of your community. So in Malcolm X's view, America was slapping Black people in the face. And so we should and could defend ourselves, which is what he originally viewed Dr. King as not doing or not encouraging folks to do. But again, towards the end of their lives, particularly with Brother Malcolm, he was willing to work with Dr. King. He was willing to work with other civil rights leaders who he had previously talked, bad about, in a sense. And so I think that is something that we need to keep in mind, and especially when talking about him, is how that evolved, how that thinking evolved over time, and what could have been is often what I think about. But that's my answer just to open up on that.
Right. No. Those are very, very good points, and I actually definitely want to concur with the fact that Malcolm X is looked upon. In fact, to be honest, that's what one thing that's actually a fact is that because of Martin Luther King's strategy of like these strategic protests to cause violence, he actually had more violence at his events than Malcolm X, because Malcolm X wasn't having the same issues because so that's one of the funny things about the ironic things about their legacies, that Malcolm there was actually more violence. The Selma, Alabama was as a result of the planned protests of Martin.